Hello, happy 2024. I hope you had a lovely Christmas if you celebrate. I thought I would share my experience today of a Christmas present I wasn't expecting this year, which was COVID-19. It's the first time I've had it. Um, and I just thought it might be interesting or maybe useful to share my experience of this as someone taking immunosuppressive medications. I know it's 4 years now since the COVID pandemic started, so a lot of people, of course, will have had this experience already. But so far, I've managed to dodge COVID, so it's the first time I've needed to deal with this, and I thought that there will probably be lots of people being diagnosed all the time with conditions that require immunosuppressive medication. So there may still be lots of people encountering COVID for the first time as someone taking these medications. So I'm hoping, although everybody is different, medications are different, and we respond to them differently, I'm hoping this might be a reassuring account. Um, so I'll just kind of explain a little bit what happens. So let me start by saying a little bit about what the medications are that I take, to put this into context a little bit. So I'm prescribed methotrexate, sulfasalazine, hydroxychloroquine, and prednisolone for rheumatoid arthritis, but these medications prescribed for many different conditions. They are not the most immunosuppressive medications for sure, but there's a few of them, and I've been advised by the health service where I live in the UK that I have been eligible for additional boosters for COVID antivirals because of my medications and health condition, and also because my condition's not fully controlled yet, so I'm due to start another medication, a biologic, which is more immunosuppressive anytime now. So that's kind of what I'm taking. I picked up COVID from a family member. I travelled on the 23rd of December to visit family, and arrived late afternoon, early evening kind of time, and the very next morning, my dad tested positive for COVID. So then we had to figure out what to do. I thought about going home, but it would have been quite difficult for me to get back to where I live on Christmas Eve. The transport wasn't very good. I would have been on public transport, and the transport wasn't very good. A lot of cancellations or services not running. And I also really wanted to spend some time with my family. I don't see them all that often, and my young nephews were going to be visiting with my sister on Boxing Day for a couple of days. I really wanted to see them if possible. So for a number of reasons, I decided to stay. I read as much as I could about what the advice now is for handling this kind of situation, because it's a long time since there have been any kind of restrictions where I live. For COVID-19, it's very much seen as moving towards being a seasonal viral condition like many others. So so it's handled pretty much like that, except for the people who are at highest risk of a more serious or more persistent illness with COVID. And it appeared that I still, although the categories have changed, it appears that I still fall into that category. So the advice was to go back to the measures we were taking back in 2020 and 2021 if someone in the household develops COVID. So being in separate parts of the house as much as possible, wearing masks where possible, and or distancing, ventilation, so having windows open, which is not ideal in December, but it was pretty mild. and cleaning shared areas where you couldn't be separate. So for us, that meant the kitchen and the bathroom especially had to be shared spaces. So we just put a kind of cleaner in both of those rooms, and I would clean them before I went into those spaces. My brother was there as well, and he continued to kind of mix with and spend time with my dad. So we all three tried to do that as much as we could, and I was mostly in one room of the house, and they were mainly in another room of the house. So not the not the ideal way to visit family for Christmas Eve, but it was kind of a compromise, and at least we were still somewhat together. And luckily, my dad was not too unwell with it. Um, his bout of COVID cleared within 3 days, so that was really encouraging, and it was good that he felt better so quickly. Um, so with me, my exposure was the afternoon, evening of the 23rd, and I started to show symptoms quite rapidly. So on Christmas Day, the 25th, I started to feel a bit off colour. Had kind of body aches, and I developed over the course of the day a sore throat, which is normally a clear sign that something's coming, probably a cold is coming. But I did think at that point it could have been, I could have been aching because of the journey. I could have, the sore throat could have been because I was wearing a mask. They're really drying. So I didn't know if it could have been something, it might have been nothing at that point, so it's hard to tell. So I did test myself that evening, tested negative. But that's probably when it started. The following day, so the 26th, it became more clear that something was going on. So as the day progressed, I developed that sore skin feeling that I don't think everyone gets, but I always get this when I've got a virus or something looming. So I got that sore skin feeling all over, and my hands and the joints in my hands and fingers went really tender and sore as well, which is a new one for me. I kind of thought maybe it's from traveling, my case full of presents, that kind of thing. So I wasn't sure, but the aches got worse. And then early afternoon, I was just kind of hit with really heavy tiredness, literally like a breeze block. It came over me quite suddenly, and I literally couldn't do anything with myself, had to just go to bed for a couple of hours. And then woke up in time for my sister and nephews to arrive. So had a little bit of time with them. Obviously, we were then kind of mixing at that point because they couldn't stay away from my dad, even though at that point he was still testing positive for COVID. They needed to see their granddad, and I didn't want to not see them either. They're both really young, and I don't see them very often. So by then, I think probably the COVID had been shared. So that evening, or that afternoon and evening, I started to feel really quite unwell, and I developed a temperature. I started having chills, so I went really, really cold and was shivering quite violently, which is really unusual for me. Don't usually feel the cold that much. So my temperature was a bit out of whack. I didn't really have much of an appetite, which again is very unusual for me. Just kind of went with it. Didn't eat very much. And took some paracetamol before bed to hopefully help me to get off to sleep. And the next day I woke up feeling really poorly, had quite a bad night, woke up feeling really poorly, and then I tested positive as well. My dad tested negative that day, so it was kind of like passing the baton. So then I had to make sure I was keeping away from other people as much as possible, only mixing outside, maintaining distance, that kind of thing, to try and not be the person who would pass it on to everyone else. Although I think everyone else in the family had at that point had COVID at least once. But anyway, I was also so I was feeling quite unwell. As soon as I tested positive, I did what I have been told I need to do by the health service, which is dial a kind of out of hours number called 111 in order to get referred for antivirals. or for an assessment for antivirals, the COVID antivirals, which can help to stop the development of the virus in its tracks and hopefully prevent it from developing into something more serious. So I did that. Luckily, it was the 27th of December, so I was able to get through to my GP, and also the advice line for the hospital rheumatology team that coordinate my treatment. And they both advised me to stop all of my rheumatoid arthritis medications except prednisolone, which you can't stop suddenly. So I stopped the methotrexate and the sulfasalazine and the hydroxychloroquine. I must admit, I had thought that hydroxychloroquine was considered a mild medication and not immunosuppressive, but I was told to stop that as well, so I stopped everything. And over the first few days, I would say the main symptoms were flu-y type symptoms. So I had a temperature, I had chills, loss of appetite, felt quite nauseous. I could also feel it going to my chest. I was a bit worried at one point it was going to develop into a chest infection because there was definitely congestion there. It was quite sore, my chest was feeling quite heavy. I was coughing, but not much was coming out. I could kind of taste it, you get that taste. Um, but and so that was my concern because I know that methotrexate can affect the lungs as well and cause a weakness there. So those were the main symptoms. Loss of appetite. I don't know if I've said that or not. I didn't really feel like doing anything much, to be honest, but I tried to drink as much as I could. So I was quite listless, I would say, really tired. I did try to, go out for a little walk here and there, but it really zapped me to do that. And around this point, I also noticed an increase in gut motility. It never got to the point of diarrhea, which I think can be a symptom of COVID. It never got that bad, but it felt as though it could go in that direction at any point. And that lasted for a few days. Um, and I realised around day 4 or so of symptoms, I I realised it was kind of my body was kind of it felt like it was almost overreacting to things. So I was noticing that even that if let's say the heating was turned up a little bit, because it was higher when my nephews were in the house, for example. So if the heating were turned up a little bit, my body would go really, really hot, and I would start sweating. If there was a little bit of a draft, I would feel very, very cold and be shivering. And I also noticed anything involving a small amount of physical effort, like walking up the stairs or walking down the stairs or something like that, I'd notice my heart rate increased, so my heart would be going like the clappers in response to something really small. And the same seemed to apply if I had a cup of coffee, which I probably shouldn't have been having, but caffeine, and or even eating a small meal. Again, I would notice my heart rate increase with the eating sometimes as well. So it just felt as though there was kind of like a heightened reaction to everything for a few days, which maybe was nature's way of saying to me, don't eat too much, don't do too much. I don't know. But that was kind of interesting to notice. Around about the day 4 or 5 mark, the flu-y symptoms did fade quite a lot, I would say. So I stopped having so much of a temperature. My appetite did start to improve, and it was more cold type symptoms that came to the fore. So runny nose, streaming eyes, headachy. I don't think I mentioned that before. That was one of the early signs as well. Headachy, just feeling really tired, sleeping really heavy. So I was sleeping really heavily at night. But there was one morning when I woke up around 8:30, having slept through the night, and just felt really heavy in my head and really tired still. And before I even thought about it, just as crashed straight back out again until midday. I carried on trying to go out for walks here and there, but I found that made me feel worse around this time for a few days. So there was one time I went out and my eyes were really sensitive to the light. It made me feel kind of really blank-headed, and just unwell. Like I was overdoing it, like it was too much at that point. And I did feel much better when I was just resting at home. That seemed to be what was needed at that point, was just a lot of rest. The day after that, so let me have a look. What day? Yeah, so around day 7, something strange happened. So up until this point, from about day 3, I guess, when I tested positive, I'd just been taking paracetamol as often as you're allowed to keep the symptoms under control, and it did help. And I could really tell when it was wearing off because the symptoms were quite pronounced, and I felt quite unwell. Day 7 was the first day I woke up and felt maybe I'll try not having paracetamol first thing today. Maybe I can't remember, maybe I felt a bit better, or I just felt like I didn't need it straight away in order to, sort of get up and try and do a few bits and pieces or whatever that morning. So I didn't take it. And very soon after getting up, I started to develop what I think is vertigo. I know there are different kinds of dizziness. This was a kind of weird head spinny feeling that it was kind of like I just felt off balance somehow, or like my brain didn't quite know where my body was in space, so I was stumbling a little bit, feeling a bit unsteady walking around at home, and I was fine even sitting down. I would kind of almost find myself leaning over to one side or something, like my body was trying to correct something that wasn't quite right in my balance or whatever it was. Very strange sensation, a bit like kind of feeling of motion when you're not moving, like if you get off a fairground ride and your brain hasn't quite caught up, something like that. I think it's vertigo, but I'm not totally sure if that's the right description for it. And as it went on, I also started to feel really sick as well. I felt really queasy, although I wasn't actually sick. Um, so that was very strange. It was very intense, and I hadn't felt like that before. I'd felt a little bit queasy and whatnot, but not like this up until it was day 7 when it came on for no reason. Anyway, my first thought was maybe the paracetamol's been controlling this or something. So I took some. It made no difference. So I don't think it was that. I don't know what it was, and I didn't. It was such a strong sensation that I didn't feel okay to go out. That went on all morning and into the afternoon, but by mid to late afternoon, it had eased. Hadn't done anything to it, just started to pass. So at that point, I thought it was worth having a go, having a bit of a walk, getting some fresh air, and I did go, and that was fine. I just found myself walking very carefully, so I was still a little bit unsteady, and I was just found myself taking really small steps and walking really carefully. But it was good to get out of the house. So I went out for a walk, and then was just took it really easy when I got back. It did stay though, that nausea and that kind of dizzy feeling in a mild form. It did stay the whole day, and since then I have still experienced it, never to that intensity, but I'm now on day 10, and I still get a little bit of that here and there, but it's not intrusive, and I don't feel really weird with it the way I did, but I do just notice it a bit. So that was strange, and I think dizziness and vertigo can be part of the picture with COVID, so I assume it was part of that. But it was interesting to me just because when I was first developing rheumatoid arthritis back in 2021, I did have an episode where I felt like this before. I had quite a diverse range of autoimmune symptoms as I was developing rheumatoid arthritis. It wasn't just the classic ones. And I was also taking naproxen, which is an anti-inflammatory, and I was given quite a high dose quite suddenly. So I thought it could have been an autoimmune symptom, or it could have been a side effect of naproxen. But I did have this experience of, I would move my head, and it would feel like my brain didn't quite catch up, and I would kind of lose my balance. So I also didn't know if this was maybe an effect of not taking my anti-rheumatic medications, because by then I've been off them for a few days, several days. So I didn't know if it could be that as well, but it hasn't stuck around in at that level of intensity. There's just this mild kind of sensation of being a bit head spinny sometimes. Um, so yeah, I feel as though this is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I feel that I'm waffling, so let me wrap it up. So I'm now on day 10. My symptoms since around day 7, day 8 have continued to be quite similar. I think they're gradually easing. I'm also just still really easily tired, so I'm still needing to rest quite a lot. I'm still sleeping really heavily at night, and it seems like I'm needing it, so still needing quite a lot of rest. Um, but it's okay. And one thing that I do remember thinking, even when my symptoms were at their worst, and I wanted to share this, is that these symptoms would not have worried me at all if it weren't COVID and my first experience of COVID, and if I weren't on immunosuppressive medications, and so not sure how things were going to go, or how that would affect me, or how it would affect my body's response to the virus. I would describe it as a flu-y cold. For me, the flu-y side of it came first, and then the coldy symptoms came after, and now I'm just still feeling a bit zapped. The main question now is going to be when I can restart my medications, my immunosuppressive medications that I take for rheumatoid arthritis. The name of the game being, hopefully, to restart them before I get flare up of those symptoms. And I am wondering if some of the tiredness, fatigue that I'm experiencing, I am wondering if that might be a sign of inflammatory activity, kind of starting to develop. I don't know. What I've been told by the rheumatology team is I need to wait until I'm testing negative and I feel well in myself. Although I was told today that I could restart the hydroxychloroquine, there wasn't a need to stop that in the first place, which I wasn't surprised about, which is different to what I was told. But anyway, so I've been able to restart that one. So it's just the methotrexate now and the sulfasalazine. I can't restart those just yet because I do still have some symptoms, and I am still testing positive, although the test line is fading. So I've got it here. I just thought I would share it. That's my test from today, and as you can see, the T line is not as strong as the control line. Now it's fading, and it also takes a bit longer to develop, so it's definitely on the way out. I'm now at day 10, and it seems at the moment as though I'm just on a trajectory of gradually just improving and improving, and the viral load seems to be decreasing if the tests are anything to go by. So hopefully that will be the case. Thank you for listening if you've made it this far. I did not expect to be waffling on for so long. I thought this was just going to be a quick one. But if there's anything I've forgotten, or anything that you would like to know that I've missed or not included, please do let me know. Please do share in the comments. I'd, as always, love to hear your experience of this. We're all different, we're all taking different medications, and everybody responds in a different way to viruses. So I know there will be a huge variety of experiences with this, as with everything. So I'd be really interested to hear how it's been from you. But if you're taking medications a bit like mine, um, and you've not had COVID yet, I hope this is at least an example of COVID being not pleasant, but okay. It's been okay. I'm fine right now. So anyway, I hope that was useful in some way, and I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.